Marcus Webb had been talking to himself for so long that he'd forgotten what real conversation felt like. 3 years aboard mining station Epsilon 9 had taught him that solitude was either your best friend or your worst enemy. And most days he couldn't tell which. The station drifted through the Shadowland sector like a forgotten toy, harvesting rare minerals from dead asteroids, while the rest of humanity explored brighter corners of the galaxy. Marcus had drawn the short straw in the engineering corps assignment lottery, and here he was, keeping 47 other souls alive in a tin can that groaned with every solar wind. Another glorious morning in paradise, Marcus muttered, his hands deep in the guts of the water recycling system. At 28, he'd already developed the permanent squint of someone who spent too much time staring at tiny components in pour. Lighting. His dark hair stuck up at odd angles, and his maintenance uniform bore the permanent stains of someone who wrestled with machinery for a living. The camera drone, hovering near his shoulder, had become his most faithful companion. What started as mandatory maintenance logs had evolved into something resembling entertainment for the crew. Marcus had discovered he had a talent for turning mundane repairs into comedy gold. Welcome back to another thrilling episode of Things That Break When You Need Them Most, he announced to the drone, his voice echoing through the maintenance tunnel. Today we're dealing with the water recycler again. I'm starting to think this thing has separation anxiety. It just can't bear to work without my constant attention. The chat window on his display flickered with responses from crew members. Engineer Chun typed, "Maybe it's in love with you." Marcus snorted, adjusting a stubborn coupling that seemed determined to leak. Love? On this station? Marcus shook his head with exaggerated sadness. Let me paint you a picture of my romantic prospects. We've got 47 people on this rust. Bucket. Half are married, a quarter are old enough to be my grandparents, and the rest. He paused dramatically, wrestling with a particularly stubborn bolt. Well, let's just say I've got better chemistry with this water recycler than with anyone in the dating pool. The chat erupted with laughing emojis and sympathetic comments. Marcus had become something of a station celebrity with his self-deprecating humor and running commentary on the absurdities of deep space life. You know what I need? Marcus continued, finally getting the bolt loose. I need one of those legendary alien brides from the old stories. Remember those tales about the Sanguine Empire? The ones where their warriors could sense they're perfect. Match across star systems? Sign me up for that program. He pulled himself out of the tight space, wiping sweat from his forehead. The Shadowland sector was notorious for its ghost stories and legends. Ancient battles, lost civilizations, and mysterious disappearances were as common as asteroid dust out here. The Sanguine Empire was one of the more romantic legends. Tales of powerful alien warriors who could form psychic bonds with their chosen. Mates, I'm telling you, chat, if there's some beautiful alien general out there looking for a guy who can fix anything and makes decent coffee, I'm your man. Marcus grinned at the camera, his eyes twinkling with mischief. I promise I'm house-trained. I do my own laundry, and I only talk to myself during work hours. The responses were immediate and hilarious. Careful what you wish for, Webb, typed Lieutenant Morrison from the bridge. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. What's the worst that could happen? Marcus shot back, sealing up the access panel. Some mysterious alien shows up and sweeps me off my feet? I should be so lucky. As he gathered his tools, Marcus felt the familiar pang of loneliness that had become his constant companion. The jokes and banter helped, but at the end of the day, he still went back to an empty quarters with nothing but maintenance manuals and old movies for company. Dr. Nora Kane appeared in the tunnel entrance, her medical scanner in hand. At 35, she was one of the few people on the station who seemed to genuinely enjoy the isolation. Her short blonde hair was always perfectly arranged, and her lab coat remained mysteriously clean despite the station's tendency to leak various substances. "Marcus, I need you to check the atmospheric processors in Section C," she said, consulting her tablet. "I'm getting some unusual readings." "Define unusual," Marcus said, shouldering his toolkit. "Electromagnetic fluctuations." "Probably nothing, but I want to be sure." She paused, a slight smile crossing her face. "I caught your broadcast, by the way. An alien bride?" "Really?" Marcus felt his cheeks warm. "It was just a joke. A man's got to dream, right? Dreams have a way of coming true in the strangest ways out here," Dr. Kane said cryptically. "The Shadowlands have a reputation for making the impossible happen." As Marcus headed toward Section C, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The station felt different somehow, like the air itself was holding its breath. He'd been in space long enough to trust his instincts, and right now they were telling him that his little joke might have consequences he couldn't imagine. The atmospheric processors hummed with their usual mechanical rhythm, but Marcus's scanner picked up the same electromagnetic anomalies Dr. Kane had mentioned. Stranger still, they seemed to be coming from outside the station, from the direction of the old battlefield where the Sanguine Empire had supposedly made their last stand centuries ago. "Probably just solar interference," Marcus muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Something was out there in the dark, and whatever it was getting closer. As he worked, Marcus couldn't help but think about his broadcast. In a universe full of mysteries and legends, maybe making jokes about alien brides wasn't the smartest idea. But it was too late now. The words were out there, traveling through space at the speed of light, carrying his loneliness and hope to whatever might be listening in the endless dark. The alarms began 3 days later, piercing the station's usual quiet with urgent wails that sent crew members scrambling to their emergency stations. Marcus had been deep in sleep when the klaxons dragged him from dreams of mysterious women with eyes like stars. "All hands to stations," Captain Torres's voice crackled through the comm system. "We have an unidentified vessel approaching from the Shadowlands debris field. This is not a drill." Marcus threw on his uniform and rushed to the command center, where he found controlled chaos. The main display showed a massive shape emerging from the cosmic graveyard where ancient ships had died centuries ago. The vessel was unlike anything in the human fleet databases, its hull a deep crimson that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "How big is that thing?" Marcus asked, squeezing between 2 navigation officers to get a better look. "Approximately 2 kilometers long," reported Lieutenant Morrison, his voice tight with tension. "The design doesn't match any known human or alien configuration." Captain Torres stood at the center of the bridge, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her no-nonsense expression. At 55, she'd seen enough of the galaxy to know when something was genuinely unprecedented. "Dr. Kane, what's your assessment?" Torres asked. Dr. Kane stood hunched over her xenobiology station, her scanner painting her face with an eerie blue glow. "The energy signatures are off the charts, Captain. The hull appears to be some kind of biometallic composite. It's not just a ship. It's partially alive." The massive vessel continued its approach, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for something so large. Strange lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that almost looked like a heartbeat. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission. It's addressed specifically to Marcus Webb." Every eye in the command center turned to Marcus, who felt his blood turn to ice. "To me? That's impossible." "The message is audio only," the comm officer continued. "Should I put it through?" Torres nodded grimly. "Let's hear it." The voice that filled the command center was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. It was feminine, but with an otherworldly quality that made his skin tingle. The accent was unplaceable, musical, and dangerous at the same time. "Marcus Webb of the engineering course, the voice said, each word carefully pronounced. "I am General Serafina Vex of the Sanguine Empire. You called, and I have answered. Permission to come aboard." Silence stretched across the bridge like a held breath. Marcus felt his knees go weak as the implications hit him. His joke, his casual comment about alien brides, had somehow reached across the void and awakened something that should have remained sleeping. "This is Captain Torres of Mining Station Epsilon 9, Torres replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "The Sanguine Empire was destroyed 3 centuries ago. Identify yourself and state your intentions." The response came immediately, tinged with what might have been amusement. "Reports of our destruction were greatly exaggerated, Captain. I seek only to meet the one who sent the mating call into the void. My intentions are entirely personal." Dr. Kane was frantically checking her historical databases. "Captain, if this is really a Sanguine Empire ship, the implications are staggering. They were supposedly the most advanced civilization in this sector before they vanished." "I didn't send any mating call," Marcus protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "It was just a joke on my maintenance stream. The quantum resonance patterns in your broadcast carried your genetic signature," the alien voice replied, somehow having overheard their conversation. "The matching protocols identified you as a compatible mate. I have been in stasis for 300 years, waiting for such a signal." A smaller craft detached from the massive ship, sleek and organic-looking like a crimson teardrop. It approached, their docking bay with the same impossible grace as its parent vessel. "Captain, we should deny docking permission," Lieutenant Morrison said. "This could be a trap." Torres considered this, her tactical mind weighing options. "Dr. Kane, what's your professional opinion?" "From a scientific standpoint, this is the opportunity of a lifetime," Dr. Kane said, her excitement barely contained. "First contact with a supposedly extinct civilization. The knowledge we could gain. And from a security standpoint, we could all end up dead," Morrison countered. The alien voice spoke again, patient but with an undertone of command. "I come alone and unarmed. I seek only to meet my intended mate. Surely your curiosity outweighs your caution?" Marcus stepped forward, surprising himself with his boldness. "Captain, it's my fault this happened. I should be the one to face the consequences." Torres studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Webb, are you volunteering to meet with a potentially dangerous alien who thinks you're her destined husband?" "I guess I am," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Besides, what's the worst that could happen?" Famous last words, Morrison muttered. Torres made her decision. "Dr. Kane, prepare a full containment protocol. Security team to docking bay 1. Mr. Webb, you're with me. Let's go meet your alien bride." As they made their way through the station's corridors, Marcus couldn't help but notice how the crew members they passed looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and amazement. Word had spread quickly through the station's small community. "Are you scared?" Dr. Kane asked as they reached the docking bay. Marcus considered the question. "Terrified," he admitted. "But also, curious. What if this is real? What if there really is someone out there who's been waiting for me?" The docking bay was a flurry of activity as the security team took positions behind protective barriers. The alien craft had sealed itself to their airlock with disturbing efficiency, its hull seeming to merge with the station's metal. "Atmospheric. Readings are normal," one of the technicians reported. "Whatever's in there, it breathes the same air we do." The airlock cycled, and Marcus held his breath as the inner door slid open. The figure that emerged would be burned into his memory forever. General Serafina Vex was tall and imposing, with skin that held a faint luminescence like moonlight on water. Her hair was the color of spilled wine, falling in complex braids that seemed to move with a life of their own. But it was her eyes that captured Marcus completely, deep violet, with flecks of silver that seemed to see straight through to his soul. She wore armor that looked more like art than protection. Its crimson surface inscribed with symbols that seemed to shift and change as she moved. At her side hung a weapon that looked like crystallized lightning, but she made no move to draw it. "Marcus Webb," she said, her voice now heard directly instead of through the com system. The effect was even more mesmerizing in person. "At last we meet." Marcus found his voice with difficulty. "General Vex, I have to say, you're not what I expected." "And what did you expect?" she asked, moving closer with predatory grace. "I don't know," Marcus admitted, "but you're beautiful." For the first time since her arrival, Serafina smiled, revealing teeth that were perfectly human, except for the slightly elongated canines. "As are you, my intended." The genetic matching protocols were quite specific about compatibility. "About that," Marcus said, acutely aware of the weapons trained on his unexpected visitor, "I think there might be some misunderstanding. I'm just a maintenance engineer. I fix things. I'm not exactly prime mate material." Serafina tilted her head, studying him with those impossible eyes. "You underestimate yourself, Marcus Webb. Your broadcast carried not just your genetic signature, but your soul's resonance. You called for a partner who could stand beside you. In the dark places of the universe, I am that partner." Despite the surreal nature of the situation, Marcus felt a flutter of something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. The conference room had never felt smaller. Marcus sat across from General Serafina Vex, while Captain Torres, Dr. Kane, and Lieutenant Morrison occupied the remaining chairs. The alien general had agreed to remove her armor as a gesture of good faith, revealing a form-fitting bodysuit that did nothing to diminish her otherworldly beauty. "Let me understand this correctly," Captain Torres said, her voice carefully controlled. "You've been in stasis for 3 centuries, waiting for a mating signal from someone you've never met. The Sanguine Empire perfected the art of genetic compatibility matching long ago," Serafina explained, her violet eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "When our civilization faced extinction, we scattered preservation ships throughout the galaxy. Each carried warriors in stasis, programmed to awaken when their perfect genetic match sent out a resonance pattern." Dr. Kane leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. "Fascinating. But why did you need to find mates from other species?" "Survival," Serafina said simply. "Our people were dying out. The ancient wars had reduced our numbers to critical levels. We needed fresh genetic material to continue our lineage." "And you think Marcus is this perfect match?" Torres pressed Seraphine's gaze shifted to the captain, and Marcus felt a strange pang of jealousy at losing her attention. "I know he is. The moment I heard his voice, I could feel the resonance in my very bones. The connection is ... undeniable." "What exactly does this connection entail?" Marcus asked, surprised by his own boldness. "The blood bond," Serafina said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried clearly through the room. "A sacred ritual that links 2 souls across space and time. When completed, we would share thoughts, emotions, even life force itself." "That sounds permanent," Marcus observed. "Death would be the only separation," Serafina confirmed. "Which is why the choice must be freely made. I cannot force the bond, Marcus Webb. It must be accepted willingly by both parties." Dr. Kane was frantically taking notes. "The physiological implications alone are staggering. How does the process work?" "Ancient biotechnology combined with what you might call psychic energy," Serafina explained. "The ritual requires an exchange of genetic material and a joining of consciousness. The bond would grant Marcus enhanced physical abilities, extended lifespan, and a connection to the collective knowledge of the Sanguine Empire." "And the downside?" Torres asked suspiciously. "There is none," Serafina said. The bond is mutually beneficial. Marcus would gain abilities beyond human limitations, and I would gain the genetic diversity needed to continue my bloodline. Marcus felt his head spinning. This is insane. I made a joke about needing a girlfriend, and now I'm being offered immortality and superpowers? Not immortality, Serafina corrected. Extended life, enhanced abilities, but death would still be possible. The bond simply makes both parties more than they were alone. And if I refuse? Marcus asked. For the first time, Seraphon's composed expression flickered with something that might have been pain. Then I return to stasis and wait for another signal that may never come. My ship has resources for perhaps another century before. The preservation systems fail. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus was essentially being asked to choose between his normal human life and a chance at something extraordinary, with a woman who had crossed the void defined. Him. I need time to think, Marcus said finally. Of course, Serafina nodded. But know that the longer we wait, the weaker the initial resonance becomes. The bond must be completed within 7 of your days, or the opportunity will be lost. Captain. Torres stood, her decision made. General Vex, you're welcome to remain aboard the station as our guest while Mr. Webb considers your proposal. Dr. Kane will show you to guest quarters. As the meeting broke up, Marcus found himself walking beside Serafina through the station corridors. Crew members they passed stared openly, some with fear, others with curiosity, but all with the awareness that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Your people seem afraid of me, Serafina observed. Can you blame them? Marcus replied. You're from their nightmares and fantasies rolled into one. A beautiful, powerful alien who could probably tear the station apart with their bare hands. I would never harm innocents, Serafina said seriously. The Sanguine Empire had strict codes of honor. We protected those who could not protect themselves. What happened to your empire? Marcus asked. The historical records say you were destroyed. In a great war. Seraphine's expression darkened. We were betrayed by those we trusted. Our allies turned against us when they realized our true power. Rather than face extinction, we chose strategic retreat. Many of our people entered stasis, waiting for a time when we could emerge safely. They reached the guest quarters, a simple but comfortable suite that seemed almost quaint compared to the alien grandeur Marcus had expected. Serafina examined the space with apparent satisfaction. This will serve adequately, she said. Your people are skilled at creating livable spaces in the void. We've had practice, Marcus said. Look, about this bond thing, ... You have doubts, Serafina said, turning to face him. It is natural. You are being asked to abandon everything familiar for something unknown. It's not that simple, Marcus protested. I barely know you. How can I make a decision about spending eternity with someone I just met? Serafina stepped closer, and Marcus caught a scent like night-blooming flowers and ozone. Then allow me to show you who I am. Before Marcus could react, she placed her hand on his chest, directly over his heart. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Images flooded his mind, memories that weren't his own, emotions as vast as star systems, and a loneliness that made his own seem insignificant by comparison. He saw Serafina as a young warrior, training with weapons that sang through the air. He felt her dedication to her people, her willingness to sacrifice everything for their survival. He experienced the moment she entered stasis, knowing she might never wake again, but hoping that somewhere in the vast galaxy, her perfect match was waiting. The connection lasted only seconds, but when it ended, Marcus felt as though he'd known her for years. The alien general stepped back, her violet eyes searching his face. That was just a taste, she said softly. The full bond would make that connection permanent. You would never be alone again, Marcus Webb. Neither would I. Marcus staggered slightly, his hand going to his chest, where warmth still lingered from her touch. That was ... incredible. I felt everything you felt. And I felt your loneliness, Seraphina said. Your desire for connection, for purpose beyond mere survival. We are indeed matched, Marcus Webb. The question is whether you have the courage to claim what destiny has offered. As Marcus left the guest quarters, his mind reeling from the experience, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just reached a crossroads. Behind him lay the familiar world of routine maintenance and quiet desperation. Ahead lay something extraordinary and terrifying in equal measure. The clock was ticking, and in 6 days he would have to make the most important decision of his life. Marcus had barely slept in the 3 days since his encounter with Seraphine's memories. The alien general had given him space to think, but her presence aboard the station was impossible to ignore. Crew members reported seeing her in the observation lounges, staring out at the stars with an expression of profound sadness. He was trying to focus on routine maintenance when the alarm started again. This time, the sound was different. Not the standard proximity alert, but the harsh klaxon that meant imminent danger. All hands to battle stations. Captain Torres's voice echoed through the corridors. We have multiple hostile vessels approaching. This is not a drill. Marcus dropped his tools and ran for the command center, where he found chaos barely contained by naval discipline. The main display showed a fleet of angular, black ships emerging from hyperspace, their hulls crackling with weapons that looked like caged lightning. How many? Torres demanded. 12 vessels, Captain, Lieutenant Morrison reported. Configuration unknown, but they're heavily armed and jamming our communications. Dr. Kane was at her station, her face pale with recognition. Captain, I'm reading energy signatures similar to the Sanguine ship, but wrong somehow. Corrupted. Where's General Vex? Torres asked. Here, came Seraphine's voice from the entrance. She strode onto the bridge, her armor once again in place, the crystalline weapon at her side humming with contained energy. Her violet eyes were hard as diamonds. You know who they are, Torres said. It wasn't a question. The Void Hunters. Seraphina confirmed, her voice carrying centuries of hatred. They were once our allies, our sister species. They betrayed us during the Great War, stealing our technology and twisting it for their own purposes. What do they want? Marcus asked. Seraphine's gaze found his, and he saw something he'd never expected in those alien eyes. Fear. They want to prevent the bond. A successful mating between sanguine and human would create a new hybrid race, one that could challenge their dominance. They've been hunting the preservation ships for centuries. The lead enemy vessel was massive, easily matching Seraphine's ship in size, but designed for pure intimidation. Its hull was covered in what looked like organic growths, and weapon ports gaped like hungry mouths. Incoming transmission, the communications officer reported. Let's hear it, Torres ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was like broken glass mixed with static. Sanguine vessel, you will surrender the genetic material immediately. Resistance will result in the destruction of the human station. Genetic material? Marcus asked, though he had a sinking feeling he knew the answer. You, Seraphina said simply. Once bonded, you would carry sanguine genetic markers. They cannot allow that to happen. And if we refuse, they will destroy everything, Seraphina said. The Void Hunters do not negotiate. They consume. Captain. Torres was already issuing orders. All sections, prepare for combat. Engineering, I need every joule of power you can give me. Communications, send a distress signal to the nearest USC fleet. Captain, Lieutenant Morrison said quietly, the nearest fleet is 6 days away. The reality of their situation settled over the bridge like a shroud. They were 47 people on a mining station, facing a fleet of alien warships with technology centuries beyond their own. "There is another option," Serafina said quietly. "I'm listening," Torres replied. "Complete the bond now. It would give me access to the full power of my ship, and Marcus would gain abilities that might tip the balance. Or it might be exactly what they want to prevent," Marcus said. "No," Serafina shook her head. "They fear the bond because it creates something new, something they cannot control. A bonded pair is exponentially more powerful than either individual alone." The enemy fleet was closing rapidly, their weapons charging with visible energy. Marcus looked around the bridge at the faces of people he'd worked with for 3 years. People who had become his family in the isolation of deep space. "What do I have to do?" he asked. Seraphine's expression shifted to something like hope. "We must return to my ship. The bond requires specific conditions, technology that your station lacks. How do we get there without being blown apart?" Torres asked. "My ship is shielded and can provide cover," Serafina explained. "But we must move quickly. The Void Hunters will not wait long before attacking." The decision was made in seconds. Marcus found himself in an escape pod with Serafina, racing through space toward her crimson ship while enemy fire lit up the void around them. The alien vessel's defensive systems were unlike anything he'd ever seen, creating barriers of pure energy that deflected the attacks. They docked with heart-stopping speed, the pod melding with the ship's hull in a way that defied physics. The interior was a blend of organic curves and crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. "The bonding chamber is this way," Serafina said, leading him through corridors that adjusted their lighting to their passage. Chamber itself was breathtaking, a spherical room with walls that seemed to be made of living starlight. At its center stood a platform carved from what looked like a single massive crystal. "Are you certain about this?" Serafina asked, her warrior's composure cracking slightly. "Once begun, the bond cannot be undone." Marcus thought of the station, of the crew depending on them, of the loneliness that had driven him to make that fateful joke in the first place. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The ritual began with Serafina placing her hands on his shoulders, her touch sending warmth through his entire body. She spoke words in a language that seemed to resonate in his bones, and the chamber filled with light that had no source. Marcus felt the change beginning immediately. His senses sharpened until he could hear the heartbeat of his ship itself. Strength flowed through his muscles, and his mind expanded to encompass concepts that had no human names. But more than the physical changes, he felt Seraphine's presence in his mind, not as an intruder, but as a completion. Her thoughts became his thoughts, her memories his memories, her strength his strength. The bond snapped into place like a lock finding its key, and Marcus gasped as he felt the full power of the sanguine empire flowing through him. He was still human, but he was also something more, a bridge between two species, a warrior capable of facing the darkness between stars. "It is done," Serafina whispered, her voice echoing in his mind as well as his ears. "We are one." Outside the ship, the battle for Station Epsilon 9 was about to begin in earnest. But now the humans had allies they'd never expected, and they Void Hunters were about to learn that some bonds are stronger than fear. "Let's hear it," Torres ordered. The voice that filled the bridge was like broken glass mixed with static. "Sanguine vessel, you will surrender the genetic material immediately. Resistance will result in the destruction of the human station." "Genetic material?" Marcus asked, though he had a sinking feeling he knew the answer. "You," Serafina said simply. "Once bonded, you would carry sanguine genetic markers. They cannot allow that to happen." "And if we refuse?" "They will destroy everything," Serafina said. "The Void Hunters do not negotiate. They consume." "Captain." Torres was already issuing orders. "All sections, prepare for combat." Engineering, I need every joule of power you can give me. Communications, send a distress signal to the nearest U.S. Sea Fleet. Captain, Lieutenant Morrison said quietly, the nearest fleet is 6 days away. The reality of their situation settled over the bridge like a shroud. They were 47 people on a mining station, facing a fleet of alien warships with technology centuries beyond their own. There is another option, Serafina said quietly. I'm listening, Torres replied. Complete the bond now. It would give me access to the full power of my ship, and Marcus would gain abilities that might tip the balance. Or it might be exactly what they want to prevent, Marcus said. No, Serafina shook her head. They fear the bond because it creates something new, something they cannot control. A bonded pair is exponentially more powerful than either individual alone. The enemy fleet was closing rapidly, their weapons charging with visible energy. Marcus looked around the bridge at the faces of people he'd worked with for 3 years. People who had become his family in the isolation of deep space. What do I have to do? He asked. Seraphine's expression shifted to something like hope. We must return to my ship. The bond requires specific conditions, technology that your station lacks. How do we get there without being blown apart? Torres asked. My ship is shielded and can provide cover, Serafina explained. But we must move quickly. The Void Hunters will not wait long before attacking. The decision was made in seconds. Marcus found himself in an escape pod with Serafina, racing through space toward her crimson ship while enemy fire lit up the void around them. The alien vessel's defensive systems were unlike anything he'd ever seen, creating barriers of pure energy that deflected the attacks. They docked with heart-stopping speed, the pod melding with the ship's hull in a way that defied physics. The interior was a blend of organic curves and crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. The bonding chamber is this way, Serafina said, leading him through corridors that adjusted their lighting to their passage. Chamber itself was breathtaking, a spherical room with walls that seemed to be made of living starlight. At its center stood a platform carved from what looked like a single massive crystal. Are you certain about this? Serafina asked, her warrior's composure cracking slightly. Once begun, the bond cannot be undone. Marcus thought of the station, of the crew depending on them, of the loneliness that had driven him to make that fateful joke in the first place. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The ritual began with Serafina placing her hands on his shoulders, her touch sending warmth through his entire body. She spoke words in a language that seemed to resonate in his bones, and the chamber filled with light that had no source. Marcus felt the change beginning immediately. His senses sharpened until he could hear the heartbeat of the ship itself. Strength flowed through his muscles, and his mind expanded to encompass concepts that had no human names. But more than the physical changes, he felt Seraphine's presence in his mind, not as an intruder but as a completion. Her thoughts became his thoughts, her memories his memories, her strength his strength. The bond snapped into place like a lock finding its key, and Marcus gasped as he felt the full power of the Sanguine Empire flowing through him. He was still human, but he was also something more, a bridge between two species, a warrior capable of facing the darkness between stars. It is done, Serafina whispered, her voice echoing in his mind as well as his ears. We are one. Outside the ship, the battle for Station Epsilon 9 was about to begin in earnest. But now the humans had all eyes they'd never expected, and the Void Hunters were about to learn that some bonds are stronger than fear. The transformation was beyond anything Marcus could have imagined. As he stood beside Serafina in the command center of her ship, he felt the vessel responding to his thoughts as if it were an extension of his own body. Through their bond, he could perceive the Void Hunter fleet not just as dots on a screen, but as living entities with intentions and weaknesses. The bond is complete, Serafina said, her voice carrying both triumph and tenderness. "How do you feel?" Marcus flexed his fingers, watching energy patterns dance beneath his skin. "Like I've been half asleep my entire life and just woke up. I can feel everything, the ship, the enemy fleet, even the fear of our friends on the station." Through the crystalline viewports, they could see the Void Hunter ships closing in on Station Epsilon 9. The mining station's defensive capabilities were minimal, designed for asteroid mining rather than warfare. "We need to draw them away from the station," Marcus said, surprised by the tactical knowledge suddenly available to him. "Agreed," Seraphina nodded. "But first, we must show them what they truly face." She placed her hand on the ship's control matrix, and Marcus instinctively joined her. The moment their combined touch connected with the ship's systems, the vessel came alive in ways that defied description. The crimson hull began to glow with internal fire, and weapon systems that had been dormant for centuries awakened with eager hunger. "This is Admiral Kronos of the Void Hunter fleet," came a transmission from the lead enemy ship. "Surrender the abomination you have created, or watch your human pets die." Marcus felt anger surge through the bond, not just his own, but Seraphine's rage at the destruction of her people, multiplied by his human fury at the threat to his friends. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that seemed to shake the very fabric of space. "This is Marcus Webb, bonded mate of General Seraphina Vex. You want us? Come and take us." The effect was immediate. The Void Hunter fleet turned toward their ship like a pack of predators scenting blood. But as they approached, the sanguine vessel began to change, its hull reshaping itself into configurations that looked more like a living creature than a machine. "The ship is responding to our combined will," Seraphina explained, her eyes glowing with the same inner fire that now burned in Marcus's veins. This is what they feared, not just the bond, but what it makes possible. The first enemy ship to come within range learned the hard way that the Sanguine Empire's reputation for warfare was well-deserved. The crystalline weapons didn't just destroy the vessel. They unmade it, reducing it to component atoms that sparkled briefly before dispersing into the void. But the Void Hunters were not easily deterred. They adapted their formation, surrounding the sanguine ship with overlapping fields of fire that would have overwhelmed any conventional vessel. "There are too many," Marcus said, feeling the strain as they maneuvered through the deadly crossfire. "Not for us," Seraphina replied, her hand finding his. "Together we are something new, something they cannot predict or counter." As their fingers intertwined, Marcus felt the full power of their bond unleashing. The ship around them ceased to be a separate entity and became an extension of their merged consciousness. They moved through the enemy formation like a dance, each evasion perfectly timed, each attack precisely targeted. The battle became a symphony of destruction and creation as the bonded pair carved through the Void Hunter fleet with abilities that transcended normal physics. They were no longer just human and alien fighting side by side, but something entirely new, a hybrid consciousness that could think and act with perfect coordination. Admiral Kronos' ship, the largest and most heavily armed of the fleet, finally closed to engagement range. The massive vessel was a nightmare of biomechanical horror, its hull covered in writhing tentacles that served as both weapons and sensors. "You cannot stop evolution," Kronos transmitted, his voice a mixture of rage and desperation. "The bond is an aberration that threatens the natural order." "The natural order," Marcus replied, his voice now carrying the weight of centuries of sanguine wisdom, "is adaptation and growth. You represent stagnation and death." The final battle was brutal and beautiful, two philosophies of existence clashing. In the void, the Void Hunters fought with the fury of those who knew their time was ending, while Marcus and Seraphina fought with the joy of those who had found their true purpose. When Admiral Kronos' ship finally fell, taking the last of the Void Hunter fleet with it. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus and Seraphina stood together in the command center, still joined by touch and thought, watching the debris field that had once been their enemy's last stand. "It's over," Marcus said, though he could hardly believe it. "This battle is over," Seraphina agreed. "But our story has just begun." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same observation lounge where he'd first made his joke about needing a girlfriend. But everything had changed. Station Epsilon 9 had been transformed into a diplomatic outpost, the first formal embassy between humanity and the emerging sanguine colonies. The view outside now included not just the familiar mining equipment, but also the graceful forms of sanguine ships and the bustling traffic of interspecies commerce. Dr. Kane approached him, her arms full of research tablets and her face glowing, with the excitement of someone who had stumbled into the discovery of a lifetime. "The preliminary reports from the other awakened preservation ships are extraordinary," she said, setting down her equipment. 17 more bonding ceremonies have been successful across 3 sectors. Each pair is unique, but all show the same enhanced capabilities. Marcus nodded, his enhanced senses automatically cataloging the emotional states of everyone in the room. It was still strange, feeling the subtle currents of thought and feeling that flowed between people. But Seraphina had taught him to filter the input so it didn't overwhelm him. "Any problems with the integration?" he asked. "Minor cultural adjustments, but nothing serious. The sanguine refugees are grateful for human assistance, and our people are fascinated by their technology. It's a partnership that benefits everyone." Through their bond, Marcus felt Seraphina approaching before she appeared in the doorway. Even after months together, the sight of her still took his breath away. She wore a modified version of her armor, adapted for diplomatic functions, but still unmistakably alien and beautiful. "The USC delegation has arrived," she announced, her voice carrying the formal tones she used for official business. "They're ready for the treaty signing." Marcus straightened his dress uniform, still not entirely comfortable with the diplomatic protocols that had become part of his new life. "Ready to make history?" "We already have," Seraphina said, moving to his side with the fluid grace that never failed to amaze him. "Today, we simply make it official." The ceremony took place in the station's main conference hall, hastily expanded to accommodate representatives from both species. Admiral Chun of the United Stellar Command sat across from Elder Vex, Seraphine's great-aunt and one of the few sanguine leaders to survive the ancient war. Captain Torres, now promoted to Commodore and serving as the station's administrator, called the gathering to order. "We are here today to formalize the Treaty of Epsilon 9, establishing formal relations between humanity and the Sanguine Empire." The document itself was a work of art, written in both human standard and the flowing script of the Sanguine language. It established trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and most importantly, legal recognition of the bonded pairs as full citizens of both civilizations. "The bond changes everything," Elder Vex said in her address to the assembly. "It proves that evolution does not require the destruction of what came before, but rather the synthesis of old and new." Admiral Chun nodded in agreement. "The capabilities demonstrated by our bonded citizens have already revolutionized our understanding of what's possible. Together, we are stronger than either species alone." As the treaty was signed, Marcus felt a wave of emotion through his bond with Seraphina, pride, hope, and a deep contentment that came from knowing they had found their true purpose. They weren't just mates. They were pioneers, the first of a new kind of being that bridged the gap between worlds. The formal ceremony concluded with a celebration that lasted well into the station's night cycle. Human and sanguine mingled freely, sharing food, music, and stories that would become the foundation of a new shared culture. But for Marcus and Seraphina, the most important moment came later, in the quiet of their shared quarters. They stood together on their private balcony, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed cold and distant, but full of infinite possibility. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked, his arms wrapped around her from behind. "Giving up your old life for this?" Serafina leaned back against him, her head finding the perfect spot on his shoulder. "Never. The old life was about survival. This is about living." "I used to think the universe was too big and empty," Marcus said. "Now I realize it's full of connections we just haven't discovered yet." "The bond taught us that," Serafina agreed. "Nothing is truly separate. Everything is part of a greater pattern." They stood in comfortable silence, two beings who had found completeness in each other, representatives of species learning to find unity in diversity. Around them, the station hummed with new life and purpose, no longer an isolated outpost, but a beacon of hope for the future. "So," Marcus said with a grin that Serafina could feel through their bond, "what do you think our next adventure will be?" "Whatever it is," she replied, turning in his arms to face him, "we'll face it together." As they kissed under the light of distant stars, their combined consciousness touched briefly on the futures spreading out before them like branching paths. There would be challenges, certainly. The universe was vast and full of wonders and dangers yet to be discovered. But they would meet whatever came as partners, as equals, as two halves of a greater whole. The lonely maintenance engineer who had once joked about needing an alien girlfriend was gone, replaced by something larger and more magnificent. In his place stood Marcus Webb Vex, first of the bonded, pioneer of a new age of cooperation between the stars. And in the depths of space, other preservation ships continued their long vigil, waiting for signals from lonely hearts that might bridge the gaps between worlds. The age of the bonded had begun, and the universe would never be the same. The joke that had started, it all seemed like a lifetime ago. But Marcus remembered it clearly, a moment of casual longing that had reached across the void to touch the heart of someone who had been waiting centuries to hear it. Sometimes the best things in life really did come to those who made wisecracks about their love lives to maintenance drones. As for what came next, that was a story still being written in the stars themselves, one bond at a time. The end.